All right, thank you everybody for joining us for our Wednesday Zoom and Learn. Our topic today is negotiating requests for repairs and everything that goes along with that. Mary Jane will be sharing some documents with us that I'll share on screen. I've also left those in the comments or in the chat section. So if you want to download those to follow along, you're more than welcome to do that as well. And without further ado, Mary Jane.
Hey everybody. I was thinking it was getting a little cooler out there, but still pretty warm this week. So yeah, my husband calls it Africa hot. So
it's like the last 2 days. I mean, like Monday, it was beautiful. And Tuesday, it was a little warmer. Today, a little warmer. I was like, oh, I thought we were getting a break.
Yeah, I'm ready. We always have our summer late in the year. Calls fall. Hello everybody. Besides the weather, I am Mary Jane Morris. I am the VP of Sales for Granite Escrow. I grew up in the business. Many of you have heard me give my elevator speech before, but I try to do about 30 seconds at the beginning of every meeting. I grew up in the business. I was an escrow officer for 20 years before I retired and I was going to go be an agent and wound up on the brokering and management side. I've been doing that another 20 years. This month is my 40th anniversary in real estate. I went straight from high school to my dad's office as a receptionist, and so I am most recently a local broker that handled 250 agents and 125 closings a month. I am very solution oriented. I come with a range of experience, and the reason Granite hired me specifically was because they wanted to add to the real estate side of support for you guys. I am specifically, my deal or not, supposed to help you guys have the best solutions all the time for whatever deal you're in, specifically during COVID time. So today I want to talk about negotiating repairs. Part of the reason that I mentioned that I try to come at everything with a very kind, very patient attitude is because that's what works most of the time. This is one area where you're going to hear a little bit of firmness from me on requests for repairs. I just want to give you your rights and not have you get, not have you make a request that's not easily agreed to or be held hostage by a badly written request. I will preface it all by saying requests for repairs are up in the air right now with the seller's market being what it is. By the time you get price and all that, they're very unlikely to want to do much to the property. So you're going to be keeping it to have-tos. And then the better you're able to negotiate and ask for what you really need and not everything on a laundry list, you're going to do a better job. So the three fundamental concepts that I want to go over before we go into the individuals is that in case you don't know, there's a phrase out there, and it is sellers disclose, buyers inspect. This is the sellers are obligated to tell you everything they know about the property. They are not obligated to go find out more bad things about their property. That's your job. That is the buyers inspect, the sellers disclose. The next fundamental concept that I want you to have in mind as we go through today's class is the as-is clause. Many people write in the as-is clause even though it is already pre-printed in the contract that the property will be delivered in a condition similar to what you viewed it in. And often the reason people write in as-is is because what they're trying to say is don't ask for repairs. So I'm going to teach you a better way to get past the as-is clause, but it is a fundamental concept. The property is sold as is unless repairs are negotiated or otherwise agreed to. So it's just a fundamental understanding. The last one you've heard over and over again since the day you got into real estate, which is disclose, disclose, disclose. This week I had a situation where a client had a previous roof leak. It's all been cleaned up, but they never opened the wall. They don't know what's behind there. I they talked about how to handle it and all this sort of stuff. Besides disclosure, we chose to do two things. They're going to have their own inspector come in so that if later a huge bill comes in from a buyer when he inspects, they'll have something to counter with and to understand and to disclose with. But we've also decided to post all of those directly on the MLS, meaning, and then we put in we had the agent put in the comments that please read the disclosures before you make an offer. Every single time, this is a technique I learned to do back when I was working with investors, and a buyer would come in, an investor buyer would come in, and they'd run the tab up on all the inspections. They'd go $30, $40, $50, $60,000 in inspections, hoping to get a price increase from you, decrease from you, and never intend to do all that work, knowing that you're stuck with all those reports once they've turned them over. So once that happens to us, if we choose not to go on, I have always recommended and continue to recommend to post those directly to the doc section of the MLS and encourage people to go look at the MLS. You will rarely after that speak to anybody who hasn't already read it and is already comfortable with it. This goes for deaths in the property as well. I don't know, 2-3 times a year we have some ethnicities are not comfortable with a death in the home previously, and they will bail before they even read the disclosures. At the moment it comes to their attention, they're out. Anything, I want to just remind you that disclose. And then, you know, of course, the other piece of that is when in doubt, disclose. So given those three precedents, fundamental concepts, I'd like to talk about as-is sales right now.
Just let me know when you want me to share the document.
Yeah, you could. Then you don't have to just listen to me.
Oh, you haven't shared it yet.
He's going to share it on the screen, I think. Are you, Tommy?
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, I'm sorry, that was the second attachment I sent you.
This is the second one?
Yes, I need the first one I sent you. That one's going to come back later.
All right. Go ahead. I'll find it.
Okay. So as we were talking about it, as is sale, there is a technique you can use when you want to close the request for repair instead of saying as is sale, because you know you've already repeated what it says in the contract, and even no matter what you write, if a buyer discovers something, he can still come back and do a request for repair. So the technique that I've used over the years very successfully is I actually counter with the request for repairs is hereby waived in its entirety. Okay, so instead of just saying as is, meaning who knows what to the buyer because it's already in the purchase contract, many agents will call me about that. Well, it says as is. I go, well, that just means he's going to be grumpy when you serve him a request for repair. You've been warned that they're going to be grumpy about it when they get a request for repair. It doesn't stop it from coming in. I can't stop it from coming in if I take out the opportunity to send me a request for a repair.
Either.
You're at the top of that. Yeah, right there. Did I hear a question go by? You can slide back to the second page, Tommy. Right there. It's perfect. I heard someone's voice. I'm not sure if you guys are, if somebody said something.
I think maybe somebody's off mute. That's fine.
Okay. So an as-is sale, if you're really trying to kill off the request for repair, name it specifically. It does not stop them from sending you one, and you would have to take in any information that they gave you that came in a report or something, but you could turn down, which is always your right, even reviewing a request for repair. So if you intend not to have the discussion, that doesn't mean you won't get the information that you'll need to disclose or deal with going forward if that transaction falls apart. You can strengthen the as-is position by waiving the request for repair form specifically in your counteroffers. Again, you will have to take in any reports they give you and factor them in your disclosures going forward. Just because somebody puts a request for repair in my computer and just because I read it does not mean they're going to get a response of any sort other than what was received. So please remember that as is already in the contract and unnecessary to repeat But if your seller is one of those people who's just positively not doing any repairs, try to shut down the request for repair itself instead of trying to use language like as is. Okay. This is intended to be a conversation, so at any point, throw your questions out there. Tommy has my back as always, and will let us know if a question comes in.
Yeah, if you guys just want to put them in the chat, or you can always do a annotate and raise your hand and we'll see it.
I wanted to slide back to the inspector for just 1 second. I see Kevin Corson on here from C21, right, and I'm sure that this has happened to him many times as well. He's the managing broker there now. The 20 times a year when somebody calls and tells me that they're not comfortable with a buyer calls and says they're not comfortable with the property condition for some reason, the second sentence out of their mouth is that we picked the inspector and that we must be in cahoots with them. I have no argument for that, no matter how long I've been in the business. It is in your best interest to give them 3 to choose from. I do give them 3 that I value highly, but I also in that email encourage them to hit Google, you know, mom and dad know somebody, whatever the situation is. It is better for you. I know it is difficult to deal with an inspector that you don't know as well as the ones that, you know, can walk the line between reality and not scaring everybody to death. But I just want to remind you that the very time, if you have a buyer who's got any sort of, you're not able to just smoothly and permanently put them to bed for the 3 years you're going to be liable. Every single time they tell me that the inspector was chosen by us and therefore we must be in cahoots with them to get the commission. So, and it's a very difficult argument to get out of. So I wanted to talk to you about that. So let me check my notes real quick, make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. All right. So how to write a successful request for repairs. And I see a typo there. Oh, and it's been there probably 5 years too. So how to write a successful request for repairs. Back in the day, as us old people say, you would get the inspection report and the summary and you would go over it with your client and you would choose a few things that were just have-tos or safety items or deeply desired to have fixed. It is now super common for agents to take the entire summary page from the inspection and attach it and send it over. First of all, I have no idea, if I'm looking at that as a listing agent, I have no idea what you really want. And I want you to know, this is one of those times when I'm going to be firm, like I talked about this morning. I will just kick it back and tell you to tell me what it is they really want. Because I'm going to pick 3 and they're going to pick a different 3 and I have no idea. So if you send me the entire laundry list from the summary, you are going to get it kicked for you to read with some, sometimes another technique I've seen is when they send you the whole list, but they'll at least highlight 3 or 4 so that you know that these are important to them and these other ones were there. And sometimes that's got some negotiating power. Like I only asked for 4 out of 20. So, or 10 out of 20 or 17 out of 20, whatever the number is. But sometimes that's more valuable than just attaching the laundry list. It does feel in these busy times that it's when your client says, I want them all, and you go, okay, and then we attach it, that takes care of it for today, but you're setting yourself up for a smart agent to reject your first round of repairs. One of the things I want to talk about specifically is when a buyer's agent writes in for the seller to prove something to him. Please get me a roof search. Please get me a sewer inspection. Please have a mold inspection. Please send a second termite company. No, sellers disclose, buyers inspect. Okay, so now using that example, I would reject all those inspections and send you back to do your own inspections. Okay, I have no obligation to find out anything bad about my property at my own expense. Sellers disclose, buyers inspect. Okay. Um, you should also be thinking about what type of loan you have and what kind of repairs you're going to need. So if you have an FHA or a VA transaction, and some things come up that are on the appraisal, people believe, honestly, I've heard this so many times lately, that the seller is obligated in some way to bring those things current. He is not obligated to do your FHA or VA repairs. He's not obligated to do them, and he can turn you down completely to do those. Even if they're safety items, it's not their obligation to do, they can still turn you down on repairs. What happens often then is that the buyer will offer to pay for them, but then we have one more problem. How is the person going to work on another person's property and not burn it down and get us all sued? So there's a very tricky procedure for getting a buyer's handyman. Sometimes the buyer wants to do the work himself. Never can happen. So I want to let you know that on FHA and VA repairs, it is not a guarantee that the seller has to do them. I would also like to follow that up with a successful request for repair has bids attached. If you truly are asking me to have something repaired, discover whether there are tree roots in the lines or something, I expect you to have done that work and presented me some bids. By the way, this is in your best interest because very often we all know that when we call people out to work on our homes, we're going to get a sky-high bid from somebody and we're going to get a rock bottom from a handyman or something like that. Between those two somewhere is what's going to happen, and we just don't know which combination of those things are going to happen. So it's very important that I like having two sky-high bids to attach because they give me the weight of it, and then if I get a credit or the seller shops it and finds somebody agreeable and more reasonable, then I've already, in the mind of the seller, he's already saved money because he didn't take our bids. During the short sale market, you could not submit a request for repair to the bank without the bids attached. So they don't have time to go figure out what it costs and send out 10 people. So you need to submit. Antoine is asking me can the buyer credit the seller after escrows for repairs completed?
No.
No money off the HUD ever.
No.
Go ahead, Antoine.
No, that wasn't me. I just typed my question in because I got a lot of noise in the back.
I apologize. Some reason came up with your name. So the question that I got, forgive me, I'm not a great Zoom girl. I'm an okay boomer girl. So no, nothing can be paid for off HUD in a real estate transaction. Now, here's a trick you should know. The seller can pay for anything he wants though. So even if the buyer pays for it, if it gets paid off the seller side of the HUD, even if he's given a credit or something for it, if it's paid off the seller side of the HUD. We had a pool repair that once a $20,000 pool inspection got negotiated, it was discovered because no one checked with the lender to make sure the credit would fit in the request for repairs, that the buyer could not accept that money into the transaction. The buyer had been very abusive to the elderly seller at this point, and when he then was advised that the seller, instead of giving the credit, could they pay the bill off their side of the HUD and then the work would be done after, the seller told him to pound sand. So the whole repair fell apart completely because there was no one to accept the money. So when I talk to you about working with your lender about, we've talked about this before on credits in general, you need to make sure that whatever you're negotiating for, as little as $150, I've had agents sit on my desk, have no way to pay, and the buyer going to lose his mind if he doesn't get the $150.
Yep. You've done that.
Yep. So when you write a successful request for repairs, you're going to limit it to as much as possible. You're not going to ask for them to inspect, and you are going to attach bids that are beneficial to the negotiations so that you can keep the transaction moving forward. So again, this is a conversation. Feel free to circle back at any time if I jump ahead. So I'm going to go on to now not inspecting. First, I'm going to speak to you as a broker. There are some situations with certain clients where I do want to be in a transaction with them where they didn't inspect, and I will often eat $250 or $350 off my commission to get them an inspection. So if you feel that the people are, the times I see this happen where somebody pays for the inspection is because maybe it's a very young couple or it's a vet or something, and they just don't have the kind of cash, and they think that they want to walk around the inspection and save that little bit of cash. There are times when you may want to consider that your closing gift or your stay out of trouble money or your fingers crossed option and pay for the inspection. However, if they're not going to inspect, CAR does not at this time recommend have a form for us to waive the inspection, but it is very important from the broker's perspective that we do have something in writing that it was asked and answered. I've talked to you about this on other classes, that the three big buyer rights are the right to inspect, the right to request for repairs, and the right to walk through. We've all been on transactions where they've waived all three. And this is going to leave me wide open in the E&O when they call me back later and tell me the roof's leaking or the showers. Every time it starts raining, my first thought is, how many calls am I going to get today that the roof's leaking? So I want to talk to you about, so if they choose to waive their request, I use the request form at the top. I say broker requires a waiver if no request is made. Like I've told you in many classes, blame the broker, blame your boss. Okay, I don't care about it, but my boss likes to know that I asked you. Okay, so I prefer to have a request for repair waiver in my transactions. And when I am the broker, which I am not now, but when I am, requirement of my files. So I want to be able to hold a piece of paper between me and the judge and you that they were asked and offered that opportunity and turned it down. Okay. You slide up a little bit for me, Tommy. I wanted to really quickly talk about termite reports. I think I was pretty deep in my career. You know, they have that Facebook funny thing now that says, how old were you when you learned this little trick that's everybody's known forever? There is a difference between a termite inspection and a pest inspection. Mm-hmm. I have had many termite inspections that went well, section 1's got done, everybody's happy, but there's rat droppings filling up the attic and nobody said a word about it, okay? Because we did not have a pest inspection. If you send a termite and pest company, they very often have that in their name, or they say they're a pest company, they can do either one. You will get a full look at rodent activity as well. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your termite and pest control companies for your inspections. Right?
Yeah.
Another technique that I use specifically, I wrote this, I'm going to give you some sample wording for counteroffers. I wrote this sentence many years ago after wrestling with the credits and the sales price in offer, then wrestling with them again when the inspection came in, and then the VA appraisal showing up 17, 19 days in my transaction, and I have to undo the entire thing I've been doing. So I use this phrase as a listing agent in all my counteroffers. The request for repairs will not be negotiated until the appraisal comes in. Okay, so send it over. I can start bidding. You can start bidding. You can tell me what you're finding, all that sort of stuff, but we're not coming to a conclusion. I'm not taking everybody emotionally through that and having winners and losers, who gained and who lost. I want one nice, clean request for repair. And I want to know that my appraisal is in. I want to know especially right now, if I'm going to have a shortage and I need repairs, it's very important to do that, to not take your team through the drama of all that. Just negotiate your repairs. That doesn't mean don't tell me. That doesn't mean you can't send me. It just means that we're not going to settle it until, so in the request, in the original offer, we are obviously coming to price and original credits if necessary. But then when countered, I let them know that we're not going to revisit that again unless the appraisal is in. It's very, very handy little tool for you there. I'm sliding up to working with the lender now, Mr. Dutcher. So I talked about FHAs, VAs, transactions. Conventional transactions, you can just say no. You can just say no to repairs altogether. You don't have to worry about whether they were safety items. And by the way, the packet that I put in for you guys, I am showing you page 1 to 3 that's in the text box that he attached for me. But way in the back of that is actually the car question and answer. It's about 8 pages of question and answers regarding requests for repairs and safety items. And the reason I attached it is because safety items or lender requests are not one bit different than any other requests you make on a request for repair as far as the seller's concerned. There's no presumption of anything because you're FHA or VA. And so you will want to do an extra special good job of getting those bids, not asking the seller to inspect, and to keeping that list to the highest and best good of all the people involved. I also want to talk about what the lender, working with the lender, and we just went over this just a little bit a moment ago, is credits versus actual repairs. Leftover credits may not be given to the buyer. So the additional repair has to go, the additional funds have to go back to the seller. You cannot get a check for them. I still have this question, can the buyer credit the seller after escrow for repairs completed? I believe we've closed that door, that there's no after checks of any sort. Some of us have been around long enough to remember tucking, small checks in the drawer, in the kitchen drawer with the keys, and that sort of thing. But given what we all went through in the short sale market and the fact that, felonies are a real thing in our business, even the smallest check, if you do it more than once, will indicate that you are not conducting yourself appropriately. So just don't let those checks, check with your lender, make sure your credit's going to fit. Okay. Another thing is that manage those expectations of the buyer. If the buyer thinks he's going to get a roof leak thing, but he only gets the credit for it, very often the credit gets eaten up and their down payment is reduced to some degree because the money's already in escrow. So in theory, the money's already in their pocket, and they had to bring less to escrow. Lots of people get to the end and think that there's going to be a check for the roofer and a check for and it doesn't work like that. So make sure you manage the expectations. Escrow's all pluses and minuses. If you've got a credit, it's a plus. And then when we go to the bottom line about how much you need to bring in, we are already crediting you the amount of the credit. It is not being set aside to pay for something down the road. We all know this, that appraisals and inspections are 2 different things. Appraisers are not looking for the same things a home inspector is. The appraiser is not turning on the burner and running the dishwasher and running a load of clothes and that sort of thing. And the appraisal is looking at square footage and quality of the property and the upgrades and all that sort of stuff that the inspector wouldn't necessarily, if it's working perfectly, have a comment about. Also, secondary inspections are really useful in the market. While we're deep in a request for repair phase, if somebody needs to go get a second opinion or have another termite company come in or something like that, secondary inspections can be very valuable for coming to a happier conclusion than what was originally proposed. termites and pest control is a very common thing that gets shopped. You don't even have to send the termite inspector out again. You can send the report from the first person to the second, and they can tell you right away whether their prices are different. Sometimes they do have to go out, and they will eventually have to go out if you choose them. But just to quote a bid, you can very often just forward along your inspections and things to people who are qualified to bid, and you will avoid some inspection fees. So I want to talk about what the seller's choices are when he gets a request for repair. He can agree completely. He can reject completely. He can agree to some but not others. He can offer other solutions, including them doing their own work or credits. We have presumed in this industry that a seller will do a good job on his home, and mostly they do. And lots of people have extra skills. They were a contractor in another life or something, and they do. Repairs do have to be to a workman-like quality. One of the reasons I like to take credits is because I want the buyer to pick their own service provider. And if that service provider fails them in some way, then it's between them and the service provider. It's not between me, them, the other agent, and the seller as to whether that repair got done. Also, sometimes repairs exceed the ability to just see them. Like a broken window, yes, it's no longer broken. That's pretty easy for us when we go to walk through. If you have a laundry list of repairs or some very complicated requests, I hope that you have a relationship with your inspector that you can send them back to check the repairs themselves. This has been very useful over the years. I will hear that it's 90% fixed, but they didn't put the handle back on right, or something like that. So when we had our walkthrough class, I talked to you about that if the buyer is not present, he is waiving that inspection, and you are not a substitute as an agent for the buyer's own eyes. Many people will tell me that he can't make it, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to go look at the repairs. And first of all, on the request for repair, he did waive it. I mean, on the walkthrough, he did waive his right to go do that. And you are now assuming liability for repairs that may be above your head. As I said, if it's a broken window or the sprinkler's not turning on or something, you might be able to satisfactorily answer whether you feel that repair is not. But anything that's got electrical or spa and pool specifically, roofs, mold, that sort of stuff, you definitely want to send your inspector back to look at it again. And this should be a service that they want to do for you because you've been a good agent to them and you've sent them out on lots of, or recommended them on lots of bids on your email where you're recommending hopefully more than one inspector, up to 3, and then remind them that they can still Google and find someone. I won't beat that to death, but that is, I spend my whole year talking backwards that we thought the inspector was sufficient for this job, and so it's very difficult. All right, so the contract actually says that you are going to, yes, Daryl has a question. Can we do a virtual walkthrough with the buyer if they can't make it to the site? Yes, you can, but they still have to waive on their walkthrough form. They were not physically present. They have to waive. I don't know how many times, that's why to some degree, that's why we all still have jobs, because properties don't look like they look in pictures. You know, you get there and the reality is very different. So yes, you certainly can offer some comfort by showing that the curtains have been put back, or that the ceiling fan, grandma's chandelier isn't gone, or the pool is bubbling happily, or whatever. But as for guaranteeing that work, you don't want to be the guy that guarantees that is sufficient. Okay? The contract actually calls for the seller to give a report of who did what and where are the receipts for it. It is the most universally ignored portion of requests for repairs. Rightfully so. It's already a very difficult transaction by that time. I will give a shout out to Big Block. They have it on every single transaction and so I want to show you this form. in your car forms, when you're in your zip forms and you're at the top right where it says all forms, you have several libraries. You have the car library, you have the letters, you have the in Spanish ones. There's a spot in there called San Diego Risk Management Forms. These are the dozen or so forms that SDAR in San Diego, which is the largest board, I'm going to say in California, they've got about 35,000 members, have created over the years. And this is required by Big Block, certainly in San Diego, and I don't know whether it is up here, but this form, if you slowly scroll for me, Tommy, you can see that some were made by the person attached, and here's the receipts for when I went to Home Depot, and the other, here are the receipts and the repairs that were done by somebody else, and here are those receipts for that. This is a car, this form's been out since, it looks like they updated it in 2016, but my entire time I've been working in San Diego, this form was available. I find it a very easy way to collect those things from the seller or give those things when I'm on the seller side. So I just wanted to let you know that there is an easy way to hand over the receipts and who did, and a competent statement of who did what. Especially if you asked in your request for repair, that's one point I didn't cover, and I'm so glad I thought of it. Please ask in your request for repair for it to be done by a licensed contractor in the first place, and especially on the big stuff, and you won't have as many homeowners attempting plumbing and pool repairs and things like that anyway. And let's see. At the very end, I'm going to hold this up. At the very end of that packet, this is the car. I think it does best if I do here. Is the car complete legal discussion of requests for repairs, and repeats much of what I said without the couple little tricks and language I was able to give you. I highlighted way in the back that there is no one way to do repairs. There is no one perfect way to do repairs. There are a lot of ways to do them poorly though. So please do try to tidy up your request for repair and keep your inspections on your own side. Don't offer to do inspections on your property when you're not obligated to do so. And then the last comment that they have on here are when legally are the repairs required to be done, and that is 5 days prior to close. Oh, I'm going to talk about contingency rules here too real quick. The whole idea that you have a walkthrough, I have it highlighted, you'll see it way down to that. There they are, they just went by. Oh, that's the credit one. And then there's, here it is. There's no one way to negotiate repairs, and 5 days prior to close is when so when you go do a walkthrough, you're doing two things. You're verifying that the property is in this similar condition to which you bought it for, which in the short sale market was, very often they weren't. People were stripping out things they had no reason to do. And so that was a big example for most of us, because most of our careers, we did not have people stripping things out. You may have a last minute request for repair if the garage cabinets disappeared that you didn't negotiate, if the curtains disappeared, if there's something like that, you may have a last minute negotiation, what things I call unnegotiated matters. Both agents will call me and say they thought this and they thought that. The fact is, it is now unnegotiated, and we're going to need to negotiate it to make it a deal. Either the people are going to put the things back, or they're not going to put the things back, but you can do another request for repair all the way down to the end of the transaction, and ask for, so on your walkthrough, that the property is in relatively the same condition as you bought it, and that the repairs have been completed. And if you aren't qualified to say if those repairs are completed, you better have your home inspector swing by and take a look at it as well. I hate to go there, but just for a second, I want to remind you that none of us, lots of solar inspections aren't getting done. And when there are, there's a couple companies here in town that for roughly $500, they will inspect and guarantee that what they've said is working or is not working is good for a period of time. Also, because lots of solars have our leases or power purchase agreements where all the maintenance is being done by somebody else, the seller may not want to participate in that work at all. And the solar company does not have to answer somebody who doesn't own the property. So there's a couple of tricks there. So keep in mind that the solar is going to be more and more now that it is part of a new build as well as most of us having the wisdom to put them on our houses by this time. So solar is going to get to be a bigger and bigger thing. My last year being a broker, I negotiated 11 either completely missed, improperly disclosed, or broken solar systems. And the minimum price starts at like 8, 10, 12, 15, 30, 60. These are not small claims. So give some thought to being aware of what's going on with your solar up there, who owns it. Lots of people claim to have paid off ones. This is the one that really gets me. They claim that they're paid off, and really what they have is a paid current lease. So it's, we had honestly 11 of them the last year. I think that was 2018. We had 11 of them go through. So let's see if I've gotten anything. Any other questions?
And guys, if you do have questions, feel free to just take it off mute and ask it, or you could type it into the chat and we will be more than happy to address it.
I have a couple of questions.
Yep.
So MJ, the period of a broker being responsible for the home inspector is 3 years, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So, okay. The other thing is do you recommend, I think you pretty much answered this question, but this is something I've been practicing, and that is that once you've negotiated the request for repairs, is that now let's do a credit so that the buyer can, I mean, each and every time it just makes so much sense to, in my opinion anyway. So the buyer can hire their own repair people, and nothing, and then at the last minute you don't have, this isn't what I wanted. You agree with that?
I'm not sure I caught the end of your question or the meaning of your question. They do convert them to credits and not check with the lender, and then I've got lender credits. And then the only other thought I had in your question was FHEs and VAs, we have to get the work done before close. So we're stuck with that. But I don't believe I got the very end of your question.
Well, when we're doing the final walkthrough and they've had 3 repairs and so forth, and the buyer's like, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't how I expected it. So it just kind of eliminates that that step.
Right. Using a credit instead, as long as it fits into your transaction.
Fits into your closing costs with your lender. You got to work in there with that recurring and non-recurring. Okay. Thank you.
Of course, I'm always happy to have your input, Kevin, because I know you've been around as long as I have. It says Daryl, but I see that that's not Daryl, so I'm sorry I'm not calling you by your right name, but go ahead and ask. Yes.
There. I saw in your paperwork, does submitting a request for repairs automatically extend the contingency removal period?
Oh, I'm so glad. I almost missed that. Thank you so much. So
Let me bring that back up. Hold on.
You notice that they broke down the request for repair, the inspection phase of that. They broke that down now so that you can take out parts. And the most common argument we have daily is that I'm not removing my contingencies if you haven't agreed to the request for repairs. This car doctrine here says that one thing has nothing to do with the other. That doesn't stop us all from feeling that way and from the practice of it. And some things just keep happening no matter what, because that's how people, I'm not signing contingency removal unless I know he's repairing it. But one thing does not have anything to do with the other. It is similar to anything else you write in the contract. It will later become enforceable as a contractual agreement with the seller, like the termite report that you asked for in the first place. But you are obligated to remove your contingencies on time And one of the things that I've said in our contingency class was, at least remove what you can. You know, take out everything but and send an ETA for that other piece. Don't go dark and put the listing agent in a position where he has to tell the seller that you are uncommunicative or you haven't removed anything. I would rather say, oh, look, they removed everything except what do you want to do about that mold problem or whatever that situation is. But you are, there are contractual things. The Pest is the most common one that we're all familiar with, that you agree to at day 1 and you expect it to be done by day 30, and you're not going to hold up the contingency removal for the clearance. Same with negotiating a request for repairs. The only thing I can tell you about that, and another thing I wrote in here, and I mentioned only very briefly, which is multiple requests. I have no problem writing a second or a third request for repair if I feel that I'm not getting where I need to go. There's lots of pleasant language. One of the things you'll hear me say, if you've ever worked for me, you've heard me, or worked with me, you've heard me say, but say it nice. Go tell them what I said, but say it nice. Say that, blame your boss. You know, there's no, this is just personal opinion. Well, when people start yelling at me, I now relate that to fear. I feel like they are getting scared and that they don't know what to do next, and they start ramping up. So it is part of our job is to, I always say that's what we get the big bucks for, taking the stress of worrying about that off the client. So I am a big fan. You know, one of the phrases I use, in fact, if you ever get a letter from me where I'm trying to sort something out, it will say, respectfully requesting, you know, just that one phrase, respectfully requesting, brings the whole thing down from a demand to a proper question. So a lot of things have to do with just speaking as you would like to be spoken to. That doesn't mean that you don't say no sometimes. I say no a lot, okay? But that, I meant to write an article about it one day, because in my mind, there's about 100 ways to say no without ever using the word no. This is what we are going to do. This is what we can do. These are our other options. And then just recently, I read a quote from Charles Ritz, who started the Ritz Hotel. Said, his quote is, you can always say yes now, because you can always find a way to work it out down the road. So there's just no reason not to be courteous in these things. And if you do a very professional job, do your own inspections, get your own bids, go to multiple requests, use lots of language, manage your clients' expectations about, one of my favorite examples to give clients when we're doing VAs specifically is I'll tell them that the wiggly toilet or the garage door rattling is not something I'm going to be able to get you. Those are not safety things. Those are not, there is a line, unless you're buying a new home, where it should be, and even then it's not perfect. There is a line between an older home. This is, again, I can't help but think that Kevin's in the same boat as I am, that people call in and have some expectation that they bought a perfect home when it was 10, 20, 30 years old, that sort of thing. So, and an agent that I respect very much was putting a client through a second purchase with and they bought their first purchase was with somebody who flipped, and it went very poorly and quite a bit was hidden. The second one, the property, they really wanted it, but it was a flip again. And I literally had to tell them there is no way for me to whole house x-ray a house. And I have to tell them somebody's at my door. Kathy, can you take care of who's ever at my door for me, please? I'm sorry. That's the one thing I can put the dog away, but I can't stop people from ringing my doorbell. So,
we had a hand raised from Antoine as well. So, okay, Antoine, you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask?
Yeah. So after, so you're doing your final walkthrough and you see that all the repair for requests weren't made, but then also you find out that they have did more damage to the house per se that you, excuse me, I got construction in the background, but they've done more damage to the house, such as removed a grill and a gas line is now open, how do you go about fixing that in that type of environment during a transaction? And it's hostile, by the way.
The immediate response is your walkthrough form where you say what's wrong and then the seller must sign, and there's a quick negotiation. Oh, whoops, we're going to send the guy back out there. Usually there's a quick negotiation, but the real reason you have a walkthrough 5 days before it closes so you can stop escrow. So you literally will not purchase the house on the day that they were expecting it to be purchased, or if at all, if it's that bad. So you will, it is common to write at that point. I mean, if you really got crazy, you could do another request for repair. So, but almost always it's done on the form. We have a tradition in the business that many of these who are online are always familiar with this, but the entire time I've been in the business, if nothing was written on the walkthrough form, we didn't hunt the seller down and make him sign it. It was just presumed to be agreed to. When anything is written on a walkthrough form, the seller must sign it and there must be agreement about it. Lately, it's been curtains and cabinets in the garage for some reason. I think I went 3 deep on curtains and then a couple of garage, the entire fancy cabinets disappeared in the, by the way, in both of those cases, they were not asked for or negotiated, and nobody knew that the seller was going to take them down, and nobody knew the buyer was going to lose their mind over it.
They weren't excluded in the contract, right? So, I mean, in the contract, when it was written, it didn't say excludes garage cabinets or shelving, et cetera.
Unnegotiated matters. This is a class we're going to have.
And back to Antoine's question is, you know, because I've heard this hundreds of times, where there's a built-in barbecue island, and it's not in the contract that, and mind you, the island itself is permanent, right? Concrete block mounted to the ground, not being moved. And there's no exclusion in the contract that the grill isn't remaining. It's assumed that it will because it's part of it. And then all of a sudden,
real property?
Barbecue grill, and you're left with a hole and a gas line, right? And I think that's kind of what Antoine's alerting to is, you know, they fall in love with his backyard, but then they take the palapa, they take the barbecue, they take everything else, but nothing was excluded on the contract.
Have now a situation that as a broker, I call an unnegotiated matter. It just flat wasn't discussed at any time with anybody, and now it will have to be, and it will be an intense negotiation because it has to happen quickly, and it can go all the way to, we don't want the backyard anymore, to a credit, to we're going to send somebody to put it back.
And Jay, doesn't that qualify as real property, just like the cabinets that are attached to the garage?
Theoretically, you would think it should, yes.
And that should be assumed, isn't it?
So here's what.
Correct.
Here I'm going to give a lesser description that sums up the problem. So in all my curtains that I had last year, the blinds were still there, meaning the twist blinds and all were still there. They just took off the fancy cloth piece. And in the contract, it says window coverings. So our side's arguing the window coverings are there. There's a blind, and the other side's saying you took the drapes. So as much as we would like to always toe the mark exactly on what we think the contract reads or doesn't read, that's not necessarily going to get your negotiation done and get it back where you want it. That's great when you fight it out in court, but that's not going to solve your problem today. I wanted to give you a little tip that I teach all my agents on listing agreements and the purchase contract. Actually, car firms in general. I think of them as questionnaires. I put myself through the paces every time I write one of those. An example I want to give you here is excluded and included. This is where we stop, call, and go. What are you pulling? What is definitely not staying? Think, walk through the garage. Is it going to be, all right, what about those cabinets? Think now. What is staying and what is not staying? Use those lines instead of skipping over them and only trying to get the bar stools or the patio furniture or something. Be thinking about the big stuff. Just use that as a trigger in your mind for really getting down to the nitty gritty. of what's staying and what's not staying.
Hopefully that answered the questions. If it didn't, let us know. All right.
I have just really briefly, I've been giving this warning in every class, and I want to give it again. Rent backs are dangerous right now with no eviction opportunity. I have written a waiver that anybody may have a copy of, and it's got a couple of samples on there. One is, you're aware that there is no eviction opportunity now, and I don't care whether it's 1 day or a month, you're aware that I have no ability to get you in to help you solve that problem if that person doesn't get out. If they're really going to stay a long time, I'm trying to negotiate big chunk of change to stay in escrow. 10, 15, 20, $25,000, something prohibitive that they're going to want back to get out. I believe there's one going on in San Clemente right now. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's on my Facebook page. I'm happy to repost it again. They paid $50,000 over in the marketplace for this property. They allowed the seller to stay 1 month longer, which they paid for, by the way. And then they didn't even get COVID, but they spoke with their attorney, and since they cannot be evicted, this is not a good time for them financially, and so they aren't going. And they are 4 months into the homeowner on the video says he's heading for foreclosure because he can't carry both payments. So I've been giving this at the end of every class. Every rent back should have a waiver at this point. And people should be very clear that we can't evict them. And it just got extended through the end of the year. And early in the year in March, I was telling people that it could be as much as 2 years with this COVID thing before we could get somebody out. Right now, I'd like to believe it's about a year, but wowza. I can't even imagine trying to sleep at night.
Well, I mean, keep in mind that, we've had this discussion before. As the courts start to open back up, what's going to open up first, second, third, and what's going to open last, right?
John Giardinelli, it's going to be criminal court, tenant, bankruptcy court, tenant court, and small claims. It's going to go in that order.
And there's going to be a lot of people in line. So, what could have taken 60 days before COVID, it could take 3-4 times that post-COVID.
I teach a class called How to Win in Small Claims Court, but of course we're all in an unusual time. So I had a client actually present me with a piece of information I wasn't familiar with this week, which was that small claims will let you file the paperwork, they just won't give you a date.
Right.
So he was wanting us to go ahead and get in line. I don't know about you all, but I don't have time to be filing cases with no dates.
But that's ultimately what it does. It puts you in line. You just don't know where in line. And eventually that line's going to start to move and then you'll get a date. But again, that date could be 4 times, 5 times as long as what it would have been prior. So, if you used to take 60 days to get into court or 30 days to get into court, don't plan on getting into court for 4 or 5 months after all this is open.
Same line on a addendum form that says that the buyer has been informed that due to COVID-19, there is no eviction through the end of the year regarding our rent back.
Yep.
At least protect yourself with that. If they're really going to stay a long time, I want some money in escrow.
Does an SIP count as a rent back?
It does. It does. That's why when I started passing this out, I had a lot of brokers call me and ask me if this meant 1 day also. And I was like, yep, because, they don't get out on Friday and then Monday they get their test back and they've got COVID and we're rolling, So rent back's real serious right now. Real serious right now.
Wow.
I've got a couple of comments in the chat, but maybe we went over them.
Yeah, no, nothing new came in.
Okay.
And I did put both documents that we covered that we shared with you are in the chat. So, you guys can feel free to download those and look at those as well. And do we have any other questions? Nothing. All right.
Well, don't forget that I was specifically hired because I am a licensed broker. I'm bonded, insured. I have everything that makes it legal for me to give you advice as far as basic procedure. I've been around long enough to know when to send you back to your broker. So the basic questions, and I can give you some solutions that you can run by your broker and they can help you make the choice. But you do have a friend in me.
I think her email sums it up.
Thank you very much.
Hey, everybody. We appreciate you.
Well, if nobody else has any questions, we will say thank you. Keep in mind, we do the Zoom and Learns every week, same time, same place. Wednesdays at 12:30. Every week's a different topic. We try and pick a topic that is top of mind to a lot, especially in this current environment, so that we can offer you value. So please join us. Please share with other agents that could benefit, other brokers that could benefit. And we would like, to pack out these Zoom calls each week. So thank you again for your time. And until next week, we will see you later.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Kev. Nice to see you
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Nice to see everybody.